Hi, this is Dr. Steve from Misericordia University, and welcome to this video presentation, Graphics Workshop in Word 365. This is part of our course, Educational Technology. In this video, let's highlight some of the tricky things that happen when teachers are working with graphics. Let's consider things like page border graphics, inserting, moving, resizing graphics, wrapping text, which is the first most important thing you have to do when you insert a graphic. Let's look at transparent colors. Let's consider resolution of graphics and how to compress them. Let's look at cropping graphics. Let's highlight sections of graphics. And finally, let's finish by inserting a drawing canvas and using drawing tools, which enables you to easily work with graphics and text within a word processing environment. I will now be following along on the TED webpage in Word called Tutorial 6 Intensive Graphics Workshop. So let's start there. Let's begin by creating a blank document in Word, and let's make a poster that's announcing a holiday such as Halloween. So first I'm going to start by just putting a little bit of text, and again you're welcome to kind of cook along with me. I'm going to say, come to Halloween party, and I'll say where. It's going to be my classroom, and when. I'm going to say Halloween at 1:30. And so I'm just putting some text here because what I want to do is illustrate how text and graphics work on the screen together. And I'm going to say, with plenty of candy. So now I can make the text a little larger. Let me do that. I'm going to center some of it. So I'll make a nice looking poster. Let me center this. And then this element here I'm going to center as well. Now, what I'd like to do is let me go and add some graphics. The first graphic that I'm going to take a look at is in the design area. Let's go to page borders. When I look at page borders, you notice there are several items available here. We have borders around paragraphs. Here it says apply to the paragraph. Here's a page border that applies to the whole document. And there's shading as well. When I look at the page border, notice there's an area called art. So in this area, from this field, I can choose something that will form a nice border around the entire page. I'm going to choose my favorite candy at Halloween and in the fall season, which is candy corn. And I say OK. Wow, look at that. So this is already looking very positive and very happy and very inviting and welcoming to our students. Now let's go and experiment with some other graphics. I'm going to start by, and I'll show you a couple ways to obtain some graphics. Number one, we can certainly go out to insert pictures we can find on our own device. We can also find online. Now in Word and PowerPoint, we'd say online pictures. Notice it's going to be powered by Bing, which is another Microsoft product. So if I'm looking for, I'm just going to type Halloween, and if I spell correctly, and let's see what kinds of graphics they will find. Notice, number one, they're looking in Creative Commons, which is very positive, because this way we're going to be obtaining graphics that we have the right to download. So I'm going to do this, and if I want to, I could add one more word on here in the search. Let me look for clip art in particular. So I'm going to go and pull some some nice items here. Maybe I'll insert this one. And while I'm here, maybe I'll insert two different ones. I'll take a nice jack-o'-lantern as well. So I'm doing some inserting, and the two graphics come in. And the first thing we want to point out is when a graphic comes in, and notice they're kind of moving around here, notice that the graphics and the text are aware of each other. Now one thing I can do is I'm going to grab one of the corners. If I take one of those corners, I can now resize that graphic. And I'm going to go down here to this large graphic. Let me resize that one. So notice as I'm dragging it either to the left or down, whether I'm resizing the vertical part or the horizontal part, if I grab one of those four corners, many folks are already aware that that's going to give you a proportional resizing. And proportional means the length and the width, the vertical and the horizontal move together. Now the opposite of that would be if I did something like this. Now that does not even resemble the original graphic at all. I'm going to do Control Z and undo that. Now, having brought in two graphics in this method, notice that these graphics are, if I try to move them around, notice how it's trying to place them somewhere within the text. So in other words, Word is now looking at this graphic as if it's another letter, another piece of text. So how can I work with this? Well, first of all, let me show you another part of the problem. If I try to drag this to the bottom of this whole document, I can't do that. I'm going to resize the document so you can see it better. These graphics won't move down. No, because just like when we're typing in word processing apps, we can only go as far down as we have typed. Then I have to hit enter and make some more space and move down. If I want to have full control over these graphics, I'm going to right click over this and I'm going to look at the wrapping. So when I look at wrapping, in line with text is how all graphics come into this app. Any of these other options will be much more usable. So just get away from in line with text. Now what are the two types of options? Square, tight, all of these, and also behind or in front. If I say behind or in front, notice how I can move this anywhere. So now I can go straight to clear the bottom of this document. I can move it up high if I wanted to. I can also hide text. And that's the difference between the two different types of text wrapping. In front or behind means that the graphic and the text have no knowledge of each other's presence. If I say in this other type, square, tight, through, or any of these, if I say square, notice how the text now moves around as I move the graphics. And so does this other graphic move too, because that has not been reformatted yet, rewrapped. So now it's still considered like another piece of text on the page. Now I can change that in a hurry, and notice it was also a smart button here that allows you to choose, and also notice, click out of that, if you go up to picture format, you can also choose it from here as well. So with this one, I'm just going to put it in front of text. Now, as I move this graphic around, because this second graphic is in front of text, it's not even aware of any of this movement. Okay, having done that, let's show you another way to insert some graphics. Let me go out to here, and I'm going to go out to Google Images. Now here I'm going to type Halloween, and I'm going to put clip art. And of course, there are all kinds of selections up top that we can choose to filter these a little bit better. I'm going to go and choose something that looks happy. This looks very happy for my class. So I'm going to click on this graphic, and then I'm going to, when I see it over here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to save this image. Now keep in mind when you save it, be careful where you put it. If you don't tell it where to go, if you haven't selected any place else since that time when you told it to go to downloads, it will end up in downloads in the PC world. Also, at this time, once again, you have the opportunity to change the name of this. I could just call this Ghost if I want to. That will be in the downloads area. Now, when I'm here in Word, I could say Insert, so it's a second way to obtain some graphics, Pictures, and instead of going the online pictures route, now I'll say this device. So when I say this device, I'm going to go out and find my downloads, and here's the Ghost, and there it is. Now keep in mind, it's a new graphic that came in. You're going to have to, in some form, go in and wrap the text in either behind or in front, or square tight, in one of those two different methods. Now let's look at a very specific technique. Let's create a background washout graphic. So let me take, say, this graphic, and I'm going to make it larger. I'm going to start by reducing the size of the document so I could see it better. And to start with, I'm going to wrap the text and put it simply in front of everything. And the reason why I want to do that is I want to have the ability to work with this without interfering with the text. So I'm going to start by proportionally resizing. And what I'd like to do is make it large enough that it sits behind all of the text that's here. Right now my Ghost is in the way, so I'm going to remove it. Now, to make this a background washout graphic, notice when I've selected a graphic, I can go up to Picture Format. This is a new menu item that now appears. And I can go over here to Color. When I go to Color and I look at the Recolor options, notice the lightest one that's here that still shows some color is called Washout. If I click on that, I'm now going to apply the washout capability to and formatting to this graphic. What washout does is it adjusts the contrast and the amount of color that's in here. So this way, to respect UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, we can now more comfortably place this behind all of the text. So this way it will still look interesting and appealing to the students. So it'll gain their attention, but at the same time it's not going to interfere with the text that's going to appear over the top of it. So at this point I have now made it large. I've made it a washout by going to the Color, and I chose the lightest one that's there, and that's the washout. Now let me simply send it. I have to get it behind everything. Now here it says bring to front and send to back. Now I'm going to point out a difference here. When we say the front and the back, when I had the Ghost on a moment ago, the Ghost was in front of this graphic. But keep in mind that we still have this overall. So when I look at the wrapping of text, in front of text or behind, or this other set of possibilities, within both of these areas, we can still go one step further and say, bring something to the back, or send it to the back, or bring it to the front. Right now, I'm going to say, put this behind the text. Now, let me bring this graphic over here. Let's take a look at its wrapping. And this is also, right now, this is in front of text. So if I insert one more graphic, so this time I'm going to go back out to Pictures, and I'm going to say Online, and just to illustrate the difference, once again, I'll look for some Halloween graphics. I'm not spelling Halloween very well today. Sorry about that. And I'm going to say Halloween clip art. And I'm going to go for one more here. Oh, here's some scary things. Let me insert this. And as I insert this graphic, I'm now going to wrap it, because remember the first thing you have to do with graphics when they come in, when they're inserted, is wrap it. If I put this in front of text as well, now I've got two graphics. Let me do a little resize here, and I'll make this a little more comfortable to see overall. Now I've got this graphic in front of that graphic. If I now wanted to change that order, I can now simply, because they're both wrapped in front of text, I could now simply say send this to the back. And now this graphic can overlap it. So by doing this, and if I just bounce this text down here a little more, I'm going to bring this graphic up a little more. Notice how we are respecting UDL, Universal Design for Learning, so that students can read the text over the top of the background. So let me go back to the web page for a moment. So here's tutorial 6. Let me scroll down a little bit. And if you want to cook along with me, here you can find graphics examples. Let's use this document to explore some tips and tricks when you're using graphics in Word and similar apps. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Now, first of all, we'll take a look at transparent colors. And if you like going to one of the donut shops to get a coffee in the morning, then you'll appreciate what we're about to do. We're going to make this graphic transparent. In other words, we're going to put like a donut hole here where you can look right through the middle of this graphic. Right now you're seeing a frame. Now we move this frame over. Notice how the background here, these words, notice how all that text disappears. The only reason we're seeing this person, because picture frame, here's a person in the frame, is because this separate graphic is in front. Let me right click and send it to the back. Now you can see that this is a solid graphic. Now let me go up and select picture format, and let me choose color. And one of the options on the bottom of color says set a transparent color. So let me go and get this transparent color, and I have a color picker tool. I'm going to go over and I'm going to click anywhere in this color that is the piece that I want to poke through, kind of like the donut shops with their donut holes. When I click on that, that whole color now becomes transparent. I can now see this graphic sitting behind. Let me just pull this over so you can see it. Notice now all of the text in the background behind this graphic are visible as well. Let's scroll down and show why this is useful for you. When I look at something like this graphic, where this resided before we found this on probably Google Images, whatever web page it was on, probably was a white background and it looked very good on there. Against this background, it's not looking so good. So let me select it, picture format, and let me go up to color, and I'm going to set the transparent color. I'm going to go in and click anywhere on this white. Now it's like a donut with a big hole in the middle. This is all open. Now notice how not only can I show different backgrounds in different places, but assuming that this is the graphic on the top, like in this case it was not, but notice how it now sits comfortably on this background. So here we find again another example of that. If I go to color and I say transparent and I select the white, now notice how this is sitting here so comfortably and it doesn't look, doesn't look out of place. As I click outside, I'm sorry, the screen is moving. Now, one thing to be aware of, if I click on white, if there's another white in the graphic somewhere, that white would also become transparent and would disappear. Now, when I look at this graphic, wherever this was originally, this blue background around this medical professional was probably very appropriate. But here it looks out of place. So let me select the graphic, select Format, go to Color, and let's get rid of that. Oh, look at that. That's much better. That will sit against this background much better. Now in this graphic, Word only gives us a choice of one transparent color. If you want to have the ability to remove other colors or make other colors transparent, you would need to go to a more advanced app like Photoshop. So do I want to get rid of this border going around? Do I want to get rid of this green in here? I have to make that selection because I only get one choice. I'm going to choose the green. And now this sits comfortably right here. So let me scroll down to the next page. Let's take a look at resizing graphics. I'm going to resize this view, so zoom out a little bit so we can see this better. When I take this first graphic that's very small and I attempt to resize it, I'll move it a little bit to make clarity here. Notice how I'm seeing the little picture elements appearing here, and it's very jagged. It's no longer smooth. Notice how this is no longer smooth. When I look at these jagged pieces, these are known as pixels. So pixels, that's a techie word for picture elements, elements that make up this graphic. So when I look at this, and I don't necessarily need to measure it or calculate it in any way, just I can eyeball this and realize I have stretched this graphic beyond the amount of color information that's inside of it. When I take it down to about this size, make this a little larger now, that's getting more comfortable, but still there's not a lot of color information. This graphic has had a lot of the resolution washed out of it. So the bottom line here is, don't make a graphic, don't stretch it out so large that it becomes uncomfortable to look at. Let me try it with this graphic. I'm going to resize this one. Notice it's starting to distort as it gets larger. Every graphic is going to have a limit of the size to which you can drag it before it starts to distort. If you leave it this way, this will become uncomfortable for many students because they're going to end up focusing on that graphic and its quality or lack thereof, rather than looking at what you want them to see. Now, these two graphics are the most common type of graphic. They're known as a bitmapped graphic. There's another type of graphic known as a vector graphic. Doesn't matter how large I stretch this. Notice it's not pixelating or distorting. But most graphics are of the first type, and they will all have a certain size in terms of how large you can drag it before it distorts. Let me do this in one other way. Here we're looking at a large graphic, and here we're looking at a little thumbnail, just to compare them, because what we're talking about here is the resolution. And resolution, by that we mean the quality, the amount of color information that is contained within the graphic. Let me take this small graphic, which signifies a thumbnail as presented on Google, and let me take that thumbnail and stretch it out to a big size. Now let me zoom in here a little more. Look at the quality in this. This is known as lossy quality. And look at the quality here. It's the same graphic, but this one was reduced in terms of the amount of resolution, that the amount of color information that's contained within here. So the bottom line is, when you're looking at graphics and when you're stretching them and trying to make them larger, and as you're trying to use them effectively in presentations or in documents, don't drag a graphic that it's so large that it loses its quality and becomes disturbing. So when I take this up here, I can see that this is probably about the largest I'm going to be able to have this graphic and have it look reasonable. This graphic, on the other hand, I can even drag it larger. There's a lot of color information here. It's not losing its quality as it moves as we change the size of it. With that in mind, let's look at another side of this, and a very practical thing. When you are creating different files, whether they're presentation files or word processing files, the size of graphics, I'm not talking about the physical size, the dragging of them, but rather the resolution of these graphics, how much color information is contained in them. What we find is, especially if you, sometimes when you find graphics, but especially if you take a picture with your phone or other digital camera, the size is enormous when you go to store it. And what that means to the teacher practically is if you go to email this to students, or if you go to store it, it's going to take a lot of space. And to the point that sometimes when you go to email, the email client may deny you the right to send that document because the file is just too large. So practically speaking, we have to see how can we make this picture take up less room when we're saving it without losing a tremendous amount of quality. Here's how we do this. I'm going to click on this graphic, and once again, picture format will appear as an option. Compress pictures is the option that I'm looking for. Now take a look at all the different resolution possibilities here. Notice that we can go high definition. Now that's ideal if we're looking to like how many pixels we want to have. Here we're saying 330 pixels per inch. That's for high definition displays, or 220 for printing purposes. When you go to print out a graphic and you're going to put it in a frame, you want it to be the highest quality you can get. When you're going to show something on the web, now we're looking at kind of overkill. If you're doing high definition or print quality, you're taking up more space than you need to. So for the web, we can reduce it. If you're going to email something, and it's not going to be printed out like for the sake of framing it, again, overkill at these higher resolutions. So we can take it down to lower resolutions. And teachers find typically that when you're going to present something in class, the web resolution here, 150, is quite fine, and print or high definition would definitely be overkill. And this will keep the size of your files much more reasonable. And of course, on top, we can also see other things that are available. This can be applied only to this graphic or to all graphics in one swoop. And we can also, and I normally will keep this on, delete cropped areas of a graphic. So if we crop something out of here, then that will be preserved as well. And that the cropping part will actually disappear and will be removed from the file. When I say OK, this graphic is now set up to be reduced in size and compressed down. When the magic happens, so to speak, is when I go File and I say Save. As soon as I say Save this, then the compression will take place. Now let me scroll down to the next page. Let's take a look at how we can alter some of these graphics. So here I've got the entire periodic table. How can I alter this graphic to make it more usable for me in my classes? Well, number one, I could highlight certain areas of this. And I can do that right within this app. If I say Insert and I look for shapes, and there are all kinds of shapes that are here, and the most common would be, for this purpose, rectangles and circles. So I'm going to choose a rectangle, and I can highlight a certain portion of this graphic. Now, right now, it's a solid block, so that's not very usable. But if I go up to the shape format, I can now go to the fill. And instead of putting a different color in there, I can say no fill. And outline, I can go in and change the color of the outline. And I'll do one more thing, because I'm not seeing that very clearly yet. It's not pronounced enough. I can go to the weight of the outline, and I can make it a heavier weight. Now notice how you can now see this much better. If I wanted to, I could also, under Insert and Shapes, and I can take an arrow or I can take a call out. And that way I can take another graphic element, I can point to something, and then I could put some text here about what this element is about and call attention to it. Now another thing I could do here is I could crop out part of this graphic. And while this whole periodic table is a really useful tool, right now maybe I'm showing too much of it. I don't need to show these bottom two rows. It's going to be too confusing for the students. So I'm going to Picture Format. I'm going to go up to the cropping tool. And cropping means that you're going to cut some of it out. So let me cut that bottom portion out. Now the whole bottom portion is gone. Now in reality here, if I go back to crop, notice it's still there. So I could re-show this, but if I wanted to truly get rid of that cropped out portion, I'll never use it again. I'm going to go back to Compress Pictures, and like we said last time, you can select a resolution, and here where it says delete the cropped area, now when I save this document again, this portion will no longer be there, and I won't be able to unhide it in the future. Sometimes when I download a graphic, I find that maybe it's oriented improperly. There are a couple ways we can do this. Notice we have rotation tools up in this Arrange group, so we can fool with these and tinker with those. I can also grab this free rotate handle. And if I free rotate this around, even though it came in the other version, now it's going to be very usable for me. Now let me scroll down for a moment, and let's take a look at choice of graphics. Now in terms of tools, and using tools, I mean these graphics, they're good in terms of that. I don't see any issues with them in terms of the transparent color or anything of that sort. They're not too large to the point that we've gone beyond resolution and they're starting to distort. There's no problem like that. But what is missing here? Let me scroll down a little bit and take a look. Are your graphics displaying diversity? Our students are much more comfortable when we represent in our presentations and documents what students see in the real world. They see diversity. So why not look for diversity in all of its wonderful forms in graphics? Here we can have people with different ethnic backgrounds, different colors of skin, different ages, different abilities and disabilities as well. So think about when you are selecting graphics, choose graphics that will display diversity. It will add to the positivity in your classroom and make your students much more comfortable. If you scroll down to the final page of this document, you'll find that I have suggested some websites here. Number one, I've suggested a photo editor online free software, something where you can go beyond the capabilities of graphic editing available in Word and similar apps. But you don't have to pay a lot of money for that app. We can get something that's free. We're going to take a look at that in a moment. Let me also point out, I've given you a suggestion here of a website in case you want to read up more on suggested graphic resolutions for when you're posting your graphics on different social media sites. What are some of the do's and don'ts, and how can you optimize your graphics for use in those places? So that's extra reading if you're interested. Let's now go to the photoeditor.com. On Photo Editor, I can start by dragging in a graphic or uploading it through the menus. I'm going to take a graphic that they've given us to start. So there's a standard and basic menu here with some really helpful tools. But some of the main things that people need to do are crop, and you can resize, and then we can play with things that are problems typically when we take our own pictures, like red eye removal and lens distortion. We can sharpen if there's blur on there, or you might want to be artistic and blur it on purpose. Another thing that's very commonly needed is the color temperature. So let me go into that one. Because many times when we take a picture, if it's not in the best lighting conditions, the saturation of the color tends to be washed out, and you just don't see a lot of color. And it will typically look something like this. We're missing the richness of the color. So we can increase the saturation. But we can also go too far. So we don't want to do that where it doesn't look real. This is over the top saturation. So this graphic was pretty good to start, so I'm going to put it there. But typically this setting of 0, when you take a picture, it's going to be many times look more like this. And then we can play with the tint and the temperature, and do we want a sepia color in there, and so on. And if we like it, we can apply it. If we don't, we can cancel it. And then there are many other things in here available too. You can do drawing, you can play with different filters, and there are a lot of effects that you can experiment with too. But a very handy app to work with. It gives you more capabilities in case you're desiring that above what Word is going to afford to us, but you don't have to pay anything for these wonderful capabilities. For our last technique, let's go back to our web page. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more, and here we have Concept Grid. So I'm going to click on Concept Grid. Let's open that up. And what you'll find is the template for the Misericordia lesson plan. And in different classes, you'll learn how to complete this lesson plan, which is a planning document, a working document for teachers as we plan to teach our lessons. One of the pieces that we're asked to do by our faculty is to do this concept map. In other words, let's draw out graphically so we can see point for point what we're teaching, what the students are doing with it, and how we're going to assess it. So on the top, we're going to draw a circle or a box, and we're going to say this is what the lesson is about. Next are the objectives of the lesson. Then at third level, we'd like to draw in here what the students are going to do and what we're going to assess, and finally, how we're going to actually grade those materials. Now, we've seen that in Word, we find that word processing is, of course, dealing with text primarily. Graphics can be in there, but the two of them don't work well together. So how do we draw that type of concept map? Well, what we'll do is, let's start by going to Insert. Let's go to Shapes, and we're going to have to create a special canvas. And if you look on the very bottom of Insert Shapes, way down here, it says a new drawing canvas. Oh, and it kind of placed it up here for me, and that's because I did not click where I was going to be at. So let me start here and start again. Insert Shapes, and let me say New Drawing Canvas. There it is. Now at this point, I can drag that out a little bit larger. This will be a place for graphics to live comfortably within a word processing environment. So on this canvas, I can now say Insert Shapes, and you already saw these different shapes if you didn't already know they were there. And I can start by drawing out one of those shapes, and then I can fill it with a color if I choose. You don't have to. If I want no color, then I can simply do it this way. If I want a color, I can select it here. If I want to have an outline, and think about how you're going to print it. If you're not going to print it on a color printer, even if you have access to a color printer, maybe you don't want to spend all the ink on this. So maybe given that, my shape fill should be no fill and just a black line where no color will be needed. Now, we already said that graphics and text don't work well together. So how can I get text over this graphic box? So if I click on the box, so notice I had to click, there's no fill there, so I had to click on the actual sides of the box itself, and then I right-clicked, and one of the options here in this context-sensitive menu is to add text. Now there is a text box associated with this. Now I can type the topic of the lesson. Oops, it's coming out in clear text in white, so let me go in and let me change the color of the text. And there we go. Now we can see it, and of course it's just plain text in a text box, so I can make that a little larger if I choose, and various things. Now, if I wanted to save myself some time, I could copy that with a Control-C. I can paste with a Control-V. Now I've got two of them. Now I don't have to keep drawing these different pieces. I'll do another Control-V. Drag this down here. If I wanted to do some connecting lines, all I have to do is go back to Insert Shapes, and I'm going to drag a line between some of these different pieces. And again, I can use shape outline and play with the color and the thickness and those types of aspects of it. So I'll play with the thickness, which is known as the weight of it. Once I get one of those, I can just copy it. I can paste another here. Then I can just move it around. So that way I don't have to, once again, play with the weight and the color and so on. And I could continue this until I would draw this map. I hope you enjoyed considering these various tricks and tips of working with graphics in Word. In our next class, let's check your knowledge of this and let's do more in Word.